Hi, this is Steve Addison for the Movements Podcast, the podcast for people who want to multiply disciples and churches everywhere. Today we're going to hear how God called one young family to South Asia.
I kind of just had a heart to share the gospel pretty, soon after I came to Christ, and just kind of had this mindset of like, man, how did it take so long for me to hear this message? And so that was like a growing passion in me. And it really was, that kind of field to evangelism, just loved to do that, but didn't have a vision really beyond that other than, what kind of I had seen around me. And so, fast forward, 3 or 4 years, and I had moved back to Dallas where I'd grown up, and Courtney and I had met, and we were dating and talking about getting engaged. And I think I remember asking her dad if I could marry her, and he was like, okay, well, what are you going to, how are you going to provide for my daughter? And I did not have a good answer for that. And so I was really looking for a job, and I had a job lined up, and it just took a long time and nothing happened. And then a friend introduced me to a brother named Kyle, and he had just moved back from New York City and was wanting to, do movement stuff and wanted to work with, the international population, which I really didn't even know existed in my city. And so that was kind of, the first introduction to it and the thought of it. And then in 2015, we went down to Austin for a 4-day, 4 fields training. And we had up until that point, been laboring for, I don't know, maybe 7, 8, 9 months together. And we were doing a lot of we had heard about a brother in Austin, Fred, who was going out and passing out burritos and starting Bible studies in apartments. And so we were trying to do that with South Asians, and we were passing out honey. We had a supporter who owned a honey company. And so we were passing out honey and not getting a ton of traction with the South Asians on the honey, but just trying to make attempts, and we spent 4 days in Austin, and it really, you have those kind of watershed moments in your life. And that was one of them for us. I remember we were driving back up to Dallas, and we were just like, wow, this is what we're going to give our lives to. And just, the biggest thing was seeing it in the Bible. It was a clear kingdom growth plan from Scripture. We didn't have to, read the latest book, whatever methods, all that's good, but it was a biblical approach to kingdom growth. And we were just floored by that, and it just captured us. So
they came back excited about this. And from the moment I had first met Aaron, I took perspectives when I had moved to Dallas also. I had always grown up in church. But looking back now, I would say so I took perspectives, and I realized that I didn't really understand the gospel all that well. So that 6-month course really just gave me a deeper understanding for God's heart, his heart for the nations. And I really felt a stirring that I know I had felt a few other times growing up, but didn't really know what to do with. And so after that class ended, I just said, okay, God, I don't know what to do with this. I don't know how you want me to do anything with this. So you're just going to have to show me. And 2 weeks later, I met Aaron, and we went on our first date, and he's sharing the gospel with the waitress. And I'm just sitting there thinking who does this? I've never seen anyone do this. It's a little bit uncomfortable and awkward, but this is what I said I wanted to do, but I didn't know how. So you've put this man in my life that's doing this. So I definitely, I just started to grow in that as I was seeing Aaron do it. And they came back from that first training, and we started doing a lot of door knocking, harvest, and that kind of way. And I definitely feel like, as they're doing these things for a while, I was like, this is uncomfortable. I don't really like this, but God would grow my heart in it, especially when I would have to go take people to do it. I really felt like that's when I would grow a lot. Okay, now it's my turn to show someone else how to do this. And we would do it, and God would just grow my heart. After we got married, we specifically moved to an apartment complex in Dallas where there was a heavy population of South Asians. And we really felt like we want to engage the unreached that live in our city, and this is where a lot of them live. So let's live here. And so we would have a group that would come meet us once a week, and we would go knock on doors, meet the neighbors, and try to pray for them and share the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
And how did that?
Yeah, I think that was our we didn't have a heart for South Asians necessarily. It was more of like, hey, here's who God has brought. We want to at least reach peoples that have migrated to our city. And so that apartment complex just kind of jumped out to us. I remember driving by it, we prayer walked it, and we just felt like we should come here. And so, yeah, for about 2 years, we labored in that apartment complex, and saw some groups start and saw some people come to Christ. But ultimately, people migrate, and they migrate in and they migrate out. And so we didn't see any necessarily lasting traction with that. But it definitely was kind of our start in trying to figure out, how do we disciple cross-culturally? How do we, see sustainable, gatherings? And so that was kind of our initiation with South Asians. And then one of those times we were out prayer walking, and we had a handful of people out with us, and we are just engaging some of the neighbors. And I met an older South Asian, and he was from South India. I think he was from Karnataka. And we had a good conversation, and he spoke decent English. And I remember sharing a story about Jesus healing somebody. And then I asked him, do you have anything I can pray for healing? And he said, yeah, my eyes, I can't really see that well. I'm like almost blind. And so I just prayed for him right there in Jesus' name. And, and that was it. And then about maybe 4 or 5 days later, I'm sitting on my couch. We had just got back from Houston, where we had learned the 411 for the first time. And so I'm just kind of digesting this training we just went to, and I got a knock on the door. I'm by myself, and I open it, and it's this man. And he just starts kind of regurgitating his excitement that he can see now. And so I was like, what in the world? So I invited him in, and, immediately I'm training them how to share the gospel, and just trying to use the stuff that we had been learning, and just encouraging him to go share with his family. And I ended up getting to, he lived with his son. And, in that culture, the son was kind of the provider of that family. And so he never really felt comfortable really inviting us in. And so he would go and walk the apartment every day, I can't remember, 8 a.m. So I would get up and go and just walk with him. And I would just share Bible stories with him, and just kind of try to disciple him, as best I could. And, try to encourage him to take steps of obedience. And ended up finding the Bible in his language and giving it to him. And, we did that for a few months. And yeah, unfortunately, our relationship with him never really grew beyond that. That was kind of our part in his life. But that was definitely one of the first, instances of kind of little tiny spiritual breakthrough that, really excited us and, kept us going and moving forward.
Right. Now, were you about to move on to another topic, Aaron?
Well, I was just going to share, I can't remember if it was probably right around that time, 2015, maybe 2016, but there was a conference at a big Baptist church in our city called the South Asia Now Conference. And we went to that. And that was really where I think God touched our heart in a deeper way, specifically for South Asia. And just seeing the vast population, almost 2 billion people across the region. And just what is South Asia? What countries comprise South Asia? And, hearing from, brothers and sisters who are serving there, what God was doing. That was a big moment for us too, that God really planted that seed that, several years later, I think, continued to grow. For about 18 months, we really labored hard trying to reach, the UPG, UUPG populations. We'd go to college campuses and, apartment complexes where, people had been resettled, refugees, things like that. But eventually, we were just kind of through some advice of others and just as the Spirit led, we started really investing a lot of time training others. And so it became more of a geographic approach. And so wherever people that we got connected to lived, we would go out in their area and just try to help them take local ownership to reach the lost in their area. And so, over a 12, 18-month period, we saw, probably 18 to 20 different, people take some level of ownership to make disciples who are making disciples. And eventually, a handful of local churches we started partnering with. And in 2017, I remember Kyle and I, we were doing a 7-day fast. And on the seventh day of that fast, we did our first training with Ross and FEC Allen, and that really kind of, took off in terms of their commitment and their ownership. And so we spent a decent season, just with them in their city. And I think that was kind of a turning point in terms of our focus. But we still had, a deep desire to reach, least reach peoples. And so after about, 2 years, after that point, we, through the organization we used to work for, we got connected with some brothers in India, in South Asia. And so, we just started traveling over and investing in them. And, I think at that point, God had really shown me personally, and I think us as a family, that we really felt called to invest in leaders, kind of that Ephesians 4, equipping the saints for the work of ministry, seeing our role as kind of, just to serve people who are taking local ownership in the most strategic places in the world. And so it was really kind of that natural progression to lead us to South Asia. And when we had those relationships, that was really what drew us. And so we had a vision in Dallas, December 31st, 2020, no place left. That was kind of, from early 2015, 2016, we kind of had that vision. And I think, learning what does no place left mean over those years really was an evolution. And Paul had no room left for himself to work in his Mediterranean field, right? And I think for us, we realized, for Courtney and I, around November, December of 2020, we really felt the Lord calling us away from Dallas. And, there wasn't anything that he was asking us to do any longer there. And so we started making preparations to transition to South Asia around that time. And then by August of the next year, that is when we landed here in South Asia.
Similarly, we both really started to have a heart for South Asia. But me with 2 small kids, that thought was a little bit scary. I was like, but we have a comfortable life here. We have grandparents here. This is easy. That would be really hard to do. So we decided to go there. Actually, March of 2020, we had planned a trip with some other people in our org to go to India and check it out. And there were starting to be like little things here and there. You can't travel through China. So I think we had a route through there. We had to switch some flights, but we still just thought, this is over there. We're fine. We can still go. So we get to India. We spent 3 or 4 days, and then that's when everything started to shut down. So we had to leave. But I was really wrestling and struggling even in those 3 days, just thinking like, I don't know if I can live in a place like this. Like, they don't even use car seats in their cars. How can I safely have children in this place? I remember really being concerned about the car seats. And so on the flight back, just praying and trying to give it to the Lord. But then COVID happened and everything was shut down for a long time. And I remember being a little bit relieved, like, okay, we don't have to do anything now. Like, the world is shut down. We don't have to go yet. We've got some time. And then September, October, November started to come. And Aaron kept saying, I really feel like, even with all this going on, I just really feel like we're supposed to go soon. And as I prayed about it, I just admitted to him, like, I'm scared to do this. I really don't want to go. And Aaron just really encouraged me. You can admit that to God. You don't have to hide that from him. He knows. And so I did. I just prayed and I said, God, I just confess that I don't want to do this. This is scary and it's hard and I really don't have a desire to do it. And it was really amazing how he just honored that prayer. And really quickly, I started to get a desire to go. And I started to also feel discontent with being in Dallas. It just didn't feel like we love Dallas. All of our family is there. But we just didn't feel like we were supposed to live there in this season anymore. And so we really just started to ramp up. Okay, if we're supposed to go, where should we go? How do we start doing this in the middle of COVID?
When I was really starting to have a strong desire to share my faith, I remember sitting in a Starbucks. I just bought, 1,000 gospel tracts on some website. And I remember sitting in this Starbucks and I was just like, I have to get this message to people. And I was scared to death. I just remember telling Jesus, I'm going to share the gospel with as many people as I can for 6 months and see what happens. And, you know, I stood up and I passed out a tract to everybody in that Starbucks. Everybody thought I was out of my mind. I got out of there as quick as I could, but that really changed my life. And what I felt like the Lord taught me in that moment was you'll never regret saying yes to me. And so every time Jesus asked us to take a step of obedience, I just, you know, that moment changed my life. Everything good in my life I can point to has come from saying yes to Jesus. And so when we had this opportunity, it really was an opportunity. You know, it was like, man, what is God going to do? You know, what are we going to receive in relationship with the Lord as we take this step and follow him in this direction? And so
we had planned on going to this one specific country where, like he said before, we had a couple of people we were working with already. But as 2021 started and we kind of put our launch date out there, that country just would not open. They had really high COVID restrictions. They weren't opening for foreigners to come. And so we prayed and we just asked God, okay, if that place doesn't open for 5-6 years, we feel like we're disobedient to not go because you're asking us to go. So where else do you want us to go if we can't go there yet? So we spent some time, we prayed and we fasted, and there's another country in South Asia. We really felt like, okay, this is a good option. This place is open. There's a lot of need there. So how about we go there for 6 months, maybe we plug in with the people that are already there locally working. And then as this other country opens again, we can shift. So that's what we did. We packed everything up, and with us and our 2 kids, we moved to this other country.
For the first 6 months, we didn't have access to that other country. And so we just kind of, you know, as we were launching over, I felt like the Lord put on my heart, I want you to share the gospel 10 times a day. I want you to just get out, meet people. You know, what do you do, right? When you go somewhere, you share the gospel. And so that's really what we did. And honestly, I loved it. I was having so much fun. I loved like the urban, you know, this is a very densely populated urban environment. And for the first, you know, probably six weeks at least, I was in heaven. I was having so much fun and engaging people. And I got to start reading the Bible with a handful of guys. And, you know, there's not a ton of English speakers here, but there's enough. And in the area we live, there's, you know, a decent expat population. And so we're able to find, you know, enough to kind of get going. And within that first 4 to 6 weeks, I really sensed God was kind of touching our heart for this place. Maybe it wasn't going to be, you know, a pit stop on the way somewhere else. And just kind of this sense that maybe the timing for what the Lord wants to do here is soon, is now. And kind of almost like he's inviting us to join him. And so, you know, with our kind of, you know, mindset and I think giftings and kind of experience, you know, the idea of, you know, who are the local people that we can invest in, you know, that's kind of our highest value, you know, thing that we're focused on. And after about 3 months, we got connected with a brother, MBB brother, and just an incredible testimony where he had came to the Lord, gone back and shared with his family. This is about 7-8 years ago, and had received like extreme persecution, was kind of left for dead. Thankfully, his mom kind of stepped in and he ended up being on house arrest for a few months and just basically just read the Bible, you know, in isolation for several months. And one day his mom, his dad had passed away by this point, and his sister come and they're upset. His baby niece had stopped breathing and was like changing color. She's turning purple. And they say, we need to go to the hospital. And so they needed his help. And he just stopped and said, no, we need to pray to Jesus. And he just said, yeah, God had just spoken to him. Everything you've been reading about me is real. And so he just prayed for that baby. And within 30 seconds, the baby was breathing again. And, you know, that led to his mom and sister coming to Christ. And his mom basically said, you know, I want you to give your life for this message. And so for the last 5 or 6 years, he'd kind of been, you know, connecting with different local leaders and trying to kind of find what is God calling him to do and kind of making attempts. And so when we met him and heard his story, we just said, hey, let's go, you know, for us, like, let's just see if he'll go share the gospel with us. And so we just started kind of taking steps with him. And, early on, like, you could just see the difference. It was really stark for me. I knew that cross-culturally, there's challenges communicating, but when I saw him share with people, and he would use some of the stuff we taught him, but mostly his own testimony was what he used. But it was crazy to me how he could connect with people where I couldn't. And, we had done a lot of cross-cultural work in Dallas, and I just had no idea. I never had a leader in Dallas that was from a near culture that really I got to observe up close like that. And so I just only had my experience. And when I saw the difference, I was converted to, I'm not the answer, to this place. It isn't going to be me. And so he just, early on, we would go do everything together. And we would invite these guys that were open back to our apartment. And they would, guys that God had prepared, and some of them had dreams, and they started believing and getting baptized in our apartment. And we were just, it was so exciting. We were on cloud nine. We were just like, this is it, but we really started to see that this brother had a vision, bigger than ours, and he was so humble. And one of the big issues in South Asia is, a lot of guys don't want to release authority to others because it kind of means, they're sacrificing their own livelihoods in a lot of ways because, they get support to do those tasks. And he just never had that barrier. And God provided for him outside of us financially, which was huge kind of for our relationship. And so we kind of started gaining traction with that relationship. But along the way, like, those first 7, 8, 9 months, that first 6 weeks, the honeymoon phase, I guess, it started to wear off. And, I was no longer new, but everybody I interacted with, I was new. And so it started to drain me a little bit. And just the attention that we received just for being different started to drain me. And then just the density of the population, I'm kind of an introvert. I receive energy by being alone. And you're just never alone. Like, you come out of our apartment, and Courtney's laughing, like, there's like 20 people that work in our building because that's just how it is in South Asia, and they're doing construction everywhere. And you come out, and at any given time, there's 30 guys on a break, and you're the thing that's going to get their attention for the next 50 seconds while you walk by, and your wife and your daughter. And you're just like, I that's been for me a huge, I feel like it's a relentless taking of my emotional energy. And I just have to find, where is that going to get replenished from? And there's no mountains, there's no beach, there's no trails to hike. What are you going to do? There's pollution outside, there's mosquitoes everywhere. Like, you can't hide from it. Even in my house, like, if I'm going to take a nap, I put a mosquito net up because the last thing I want is my 30-minute cat nap to get interrupted by a mosquito bite, So those are some of the challenges for me. Courtney has different giftings and she can share her challenges, but she's definitely more resilient on that stuff than I am.
For the kids and I, we're doing really, really well. I think a lot of that has to do with there's an expat school here. It was actually started as a school for MKs a long time ago. And so the last 5 or 6 years, for different reasons, they opened it up to Bengalis. So it's probably 60% Bengali kids that go there, maybe a little bit more. The other is international workers, or pretty much all the international people are embassy workers. Yeah. So that was huge. I think I could do homeschooling if I really, really made myself do it, but I just don't feel like that's a strength of mine. It would really be hard for me. It would take a lot. So having that school here has been a huge blessing. They have a bus system that comes and gets the kids, because we don't have a car, and the kids have made friends really fast. And for me, it was really helpful because one of the main ways that I learned to be engaging the harvest in Dallas, I would go knocking on the doors with everyone when we had our daughter. But when she was about a year old, it just got hard. She won't stay in one place. She's running through the house. And then we had our son. So now I have 2 kids, and knocking on doors is just not super, it just doesn't really work for me anymore. And so I started to try to think of ways, how can I start engaging the harvest myself? And so I would go to different playgrounds and parks. And as the kids are playing, just trying to sit and talk to moms, pray for them, and then share that way. And they're actually at that one really big mega church in Dallas. They have a huge indoor playground. And every time I would go there, it was all international people. Like there was no white people in there, no one that goes to that church. They just go for the free playground. And so I started sharing a lot there, and I actually got to start reading the Bible with an Iranian woman who ended up coming to faith, and we got to baptize her. But so anyway, so that was really my pattern in Dallas. And so as we shifted here, for me, being able to have other parents where I can share with, that's what I was looking for. So the kids going to school and having this pool of friends where now I have a pool of moms that I can try to start engaging. That I think that was really helpful for me. So I've been we do different play dates, and I try to share with the moms and get stuff going that way. But so the school has been really helpful. But yeah, I think the kids and I can't really think of, we're doing very, very well. It's by the grace of God, because I was very scared to bring my kids to a place like this, but they're doing really well. And I enjoy living here. I think the people are fun, and I don't mind the attention as much. I just take pictures of them. And
yeah, from those kind of early months where I was able to be kind of on the front line, so to speak. We've seen one church here in the city, and then that's multiplied to a second generation church in another part of the city. And so I get to kind of interact with that first one a little bit. We've had some challenges with, people from different classes of society kind of get looked at differently when they come outside of their bubble. And so we've had to shift our meeting place a couple times already because, people in the building complain, hey, why are these people coming? Who are they? And there's just a lot of suspicion. And I think that's kind of, the religious environment here just kind of lends itself to that. So that's been some challenges, but those two churches have stuck. And then just with our brothers' relationships, we've been connected with, lots of different people. And he just has a really intuitive sense of how to kind of filter. And, finances is probably honestly the biggest filter here in South Asia and in our country specifically. There's a very small percentage of believers. And so if you believe, there's a lot of people that will pay you for that, if you know what I'm saying. And so he does a good job of kind of finding who's called from the Lord, whose heart bleeds for the kingdom, and who's looking for, rightfully so, a way to provide for their family primarily. And kind of that Matthew 6:33 dynamic. And because of his personal experience, he kind of has a way of, for us cross-culturally, economically, the gap there, like it doesn't really work. But for him, he can have those. And so he does a lot of that filtering on his own. And so we've gotten connected with 3 leaders in different parts of the country that so a couple of them already had some existing work, but didn't have any, training, certainly no like real kingdom growth plan, vision, but these are the ones that have kind of come through that filter that are teachable, that are really wanting to see others raised up and take ownership. So we've been spending some time with those brothers, and they're starting to see some traction in some of the rural areas. And so we're really excited about that. And, 2 of those brothers are working, among cousins. They're both MBB leaders. And then another one is in another part of Bangladesh, working more with tribal peoples. And so, anyways, yeah, that's, we're figuring out, all these different dynamics. And for me personally, where can I go? Where can I not go? And really deferring to, our brother, what's safe, what's helpful for him. And so kind of that balance where you want to model, assist, watch, launch, but where can you go to model if it's dangerous for the local people, your presence there? And so kind of finding that balance. And, we're making some attempts with that, bringing guys into town more often because we can kind of blend in here, especially in our area more. And so just trying to see him take more and more ownership and, kind of just in time type training as different. So we just got to do some gen mapping this week with 2 of those brothers we brought into town. And, just kind of seeing how's the early work going, showing them, hey, what does a healthy church look like? And every one of them, communion, baptism, there's a little bit of stuckage there. So kind of working with them through that. Masum sharing his experience. And I guess you can get that out. Sorry. Our brother sharing his experience. And, he's a practitioner, right? So he's not just training these guys, but he's doing the work. And from his experience, he's teaching and releasing and giving away the things he's learning. It's like, I just believe God wants to do this. And this is his heart, and when I look at the population of the country that we live in, I just think I'm 100% confident that God wants every man and woman, boy and girl to hear the gospel. And for us, we would need mathematically 500,000 people a day to hear the gospel for everyone in a year to hear. And so I just believe God wants to do that. And I'm just confident that it's not depending on me. And ultimately that, God is calling me into a relationship with himself. I love John Piper. He says missions exist as worship doesn't. And so for me, it's just, I get to be with God every day. And the challenges, all my junk, all my baggage, all my sin, I have someone to go to that loves me, that I trust with that stuff. You know what I mean?
Every time you walk out of your door here, you see so much hopelessness, like lots and lots of beggars everywhere. There's kids just running around in the street. There's just a lot of sadness that you see, and you can just feel that. And so, how many of these people are going to have an opportunity to hear the hope of Jesus? The Christian population is so small. Like, how are we helping to engage them in sharing? And it's really, I didn't realize before, it's a struggle here. The people here that were born Christian, they're really, really scared of sharing with the majority population, and they don't do it. And we've even heard stories of when cousin seekers come to churches here, they get turned away because the church is scared of them. And so, how do we help them have a heart for these people? When you look outside, you see everyone going by, they have no hope. Most of them won't hear the hope we have in Jesus, even as, they ask us for money for the 100th time, and they follow you down the street and you just want to be annoyed at them. You just think like, this is what they have their hope in. This is all they know. They don't have hope in anything else. They're just trying to provide for themselves. So how can we help them see that where you're trying to find security, whether it's from food or money, I want you to have those things, but more than that, you need the hope of Jesus. That's the only thing that's going to get you out of it.